How must one imagine the emergence of social differences? Somehow I imagine that peoples lived in relatively small groups, relatively communistically, sharing everything. Did barter then create the first differences? Robbery and the division of land? Or how did this injustice come about?
This is a great and profound question that touches the core of human history. Your idea of small, relatively communistic groups is historically completely correct. And your assumptions about how inequality came about also hit some of the crucial points. Science, archaeology, anthropology, and sociology describes this process not as a single event, but as a centuries-long, multi-layered transformation that took place in several phases. You can think of it like a domino effect, where one innovation set off the next. Here is the prevailing understanding of how social differences emerged. 1. The starting point. Original equality, hunter-gatherers. You are absolutely right. For the vast majority of human history, about 95%, people lived in small, nomadic groups of 20 to 50 individuals. These societies were indeed largely egalitarian. Why? Because there was hardly any possessions that could be accumulated. Everything one owned was carried on one's body: tools, weapons, jewelry. Food was shared, as it spoiled quickly, and hunting was unpredictable. There were certainly differences in status. A good hunter or a wise shaman enjoyed respect, but this power was not inheritable and did not give anyone the right to command others. 2. The first major upheaval. Sedentarism, the Neolithic Revolution. About 12,000 years ago, in the Fertile Crescent, the so-called Neolithic Revolution began. Humans started to cultivate plants and domesticate animals. The consequence? People no longer had to wander to find food. They stayed in one place to work the fields. The decisive innovation: surplus. For the first time in history, a family or a village could produce more food than they needed to survive. This surplus had to be stored in pots, granaries, storage rooms. 3. Your assumptions in detail. How surplus led to inequality. Now to your specific questions, which describe exactly the right mechanisms. Did barter create the first differences? Partly yes, but indirectly. Initially, surplus was shared within the village community. But when Village A had a lot of grain and Village B had a lot of obsidian for tools, they began to trade. Those who controlled trade could amass great wealth. This was the beginning of specialized craftspeople, potters, weavers, smiths, who no longer had to produce their own food, and thus became dependent on the community, but also privileged. Robbery and the division of land. Robbery. As soon as there were storehouses with supplies, robbery became attractive. Villages had to defend themselves. The best warriors and leaders who protected the village received more power and a larger share of the surplus in return. Protectors often became rulers. Division of land. This was perhaps the biggest step. As the population grew, good farmland became scarce. Those who were there first or who had the largest family/military power claimed the best land for themselves. The division of land created private property. Suddenly, land was no longer common property for all, but something one owned, inherited, and defended. 4. The next step: administration, writing, and power. To manage all these new challenges, managing surplus, controlling trade, fending off robbery, and disputing land, a new professional class emerged: administrators and priests. They kept lists of who had to give how much and who received what. They invented writing, initially as bookkeeping for grain and livestock. They claimed to act on behalf of the gods to legitimize their power. This is how the first city-states, like Uruk or Ur, came into being. At their top stood a king, often venerated as divine or semi-divine. The social pyramid was now complete. At the top, the king and priests, below them the administrators and merchants, then the farmers and craftspeople, and at the very bottom, the slaves, often prisoners of war. 5. The difference from your imagination. Your imagination is very accurate. The crucial point is, injustice did not arise through evil intentions, but through a systemic logic. As long as there was no surplus, one had to share in order to survive. Communism of scarcity. As soon as there was surplus, it became possible to exercise power by controlling access to that surplus. The possibility of keeping something for oneself created the incentive for inequality. So injustice is not an accident of history, but rather the flip side of the coin of civilization, division of labor, and technological progress.